everybody. Welcome back to English Champion. On this episode, I want to discuss a couple things that have been recent headlines, and they are outside of the world of education, but I'm going to bring them into the world of education because this is what I talk about in some of my classes. So I want to focus on a few sports incidents that have occurred recently, and these last couple days especially, that has really, one incident in particular has really overtaken the conversation in the culture. And we saw just a few days ago there was a couple of cheating scandals that have occurred among some NBA guys, one player, one former player who's a coach. And so this is sort of a little bit of a string of bad behavior among athletes or people involved in the sports world. And this comes on the heels of just a week or two ago, former quarterback Mark Sanchez engaged in a violent altercation that led to him getting arrested. Just the other night, Draymond Green, got a technical foul, which on the first game of the season, just barely starting the game, he already was acting poorly and got a technical foul. Just a couple weeks ago, I did a short episode about the bad behavior at the Ryder Cup and the big golf tournament. So sports behavior, there have been some dust-ups in some college football games in the last couple weeks, players, fans, teams not behaving properly. So there have been, several instances recently, and this goes back a long ways. This always occurs to a certain degree, but it seems like things are really getting clumped up and happening all at once here, where the sports world is demonstrating to all the viewers that they don't know how to behave properly. And what I do in my classes, I teach, even though I'm an English professor, I built a course called Sports and Literature. And what we do in that class is we analyze sports through a lens of stories, and through those stories, some of them sports stories, some more traditional stories that we link back to sports, we show how athletes or people who are fans or just anyone involved in the world of sports, a coach, whatever, how they can behave properly and the life lessons we can learn from these great stories and these great sports figures that we've learned about from the past or even ones that are currently playing or participating right now. And so I link the fields of sports with my field of English in education. And it's a very useful class, and I've made it available online, and I'll put the link below. But I'm highlighting it here today because this scandal from this most recent one a few days ago is something we talk about pretty extensively in my course, because it comes up during the unit or the weeks that we discuss the great baseball book Shoeless Joe, and then the movie that was made out of it, Field of Dreams. And the foundation of that story is, yes, it's a father-son story. Yes, it's about building a ball field in the cornfield of Iowa. But really, the foundation of where that story emerges is it's out of a cheating scandal. The famous Shoeless Joe and the White Sox were caught cheating during the World Series. And so the dispute was, well, Shoeless Joe, did he actually participate? He took the money. And so, even though it didn't look like he was manipulating the games in any way, he because he was part of it, he has been banned from the Hall of Fame and from the record books and all those things. And of course, in that film, they discuss, well, is that fair? Should he have been allowed to still stay in baseball and all that stuff? So cheating is at the foundation of that story of Shoeless Joe and then Field of Dreams. And so we talk in my class about why following rules is so important. And we draw a distinction between the normal rules of normal games, such as, holding in football or pass interference, or basketball, there's traveling, or there's, committing a physical foul. There are penalties, and they happen every single game. And so what makes cheating so different than these other penalties? After all of those other fouls that people commit, they do so for an advantage. They're trying to manipulate the outcome. They're trying to defeat an opponent. So, we could say, well, cheating is the same thing. You're trying to win. And so you're just doing it in a way that's not fair. But, it's just like any other infraction. And yet when we see scandals throughout history that involve cheating, the punishment is always way, way worse. Whether it was Shoeless Joe, whether it was Pete Rose, whether it was Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens in the steroid era, anyone who gets sort of convicted of manipulating the game for the purposes of cheating and gaining an advantage, you're pretty much out of the league. You're pretty much forgotten in a certain sense. And it's sort of weird to think about because we have so many instances of athletes behaving poorly, and yet nothing really happens. Maybe they get suspended, they get technical fouls. Again, maybe they get kicked out of games or suspended for a while, or they get, maybe a team trades them because they're sick of putting up with them or whatever, but their records remain. And if they're good enough, they even remain in the Hall of Fame. We have people, again, in all types of sports who have, abused their wives and had problems with drugs and alcohol, and they have had felonies and just whatever things you can think of. There have been athletes who have committed those illegalities, in addition to whatever other things on the court that every athlete does that break those rules of each game. Yet, when it comes to cheating, the punishment is always much, much worse. And so we have to, in my class, we take a long look and try and figure out, well, why is that? And the real reason, of course, is because those other infractions in a sports game, yes, they're trying to gain an advantage. Yes, they're trying to win. Yes, they're trying to defeat that opponent. But those actions can be handled and addressed, and they don't affect the long-term performance of the sport, of the game. The game will keep going. We can blow the whistle and call an infraction, and that person can get penalized, or there can be some larger punishment, like I said, an ejection or suspension or something. But the game still continues. With cheating, however, the very fabric of what the game is starts to diminish. So we have to remember, and this is what I talk about with my students, that yes, people commit fouls, they commit infractions, they commit penalties, and those are dealt with by the referees or by the teams or by the media. Kind of regulate some of these things by calling things out, and they have to explain themselves. Like, there is some regulation within that, and so we can address it, and then we often move on. But cheating is so important, even if it's done in what seems to be a sort of small way, where you're like, I'm just trying to win a few bucks on covering the point spread or whatever. What it starts to do, as I said, it disintegrates the very foundation of what the game is supposed to be. And so we start putting in people's minds, whether the athletes, the fans, the coaches, the refs, anyone who's participating in this, when we start seeing cheating, we automatically start going, well, wait a second, is this thing called a game, or even bigger than that, is this thing called our sport even real anymore? Can this even function? Because after all, if I don't know if you're trying your hardest, or if I don't know that you're doing something behind the scenes to try to manipulate the outcome, then maybe I don't want to play. And so now the risk, in this case to the NBA, other sports, baseball has dealt with it as well, where we start wondering, well, can a sport survive if the people participating are not abiding by not just the rules of the individual game, but the rules of the spirit of the game itself? And the rules of the spirit of the game are, well, if we're going to have a game, the whole point we have sports is we have to try our best, because it's no fun playing against people who don't try. We're trying to win, that's why we keep score, and we want an outcome of this thing. And we have to acknowledge that whatever the outcome is, win or lose, it's okay, because we enjoyed the process and we want to do it again at some point. The whole goal of sport is not to win or lose. The whole goal of sport is to keep the sport going. It's to have more games. So that's what keeps people coming back. Even if you're on a losing team, well, why do you keep playing? Your team stinks. You're a loser. Why do you care? Well, because the game is more important than the winning or losing. And even people who win, who have reached the top of the mountain and they've defeated all the opponents, you think, okay, I'm done. I've beaten everybody. I don't need to do this anymore. Well, why do they keep doing it? Because the game itself is what they're after. And so if we do anything to damage the structure of the game in a way where people don't want to participate in the game anymore, well, then we've lost everything. That's the worst thing we can have. That's more important than losing the game. We could say, well, you bet on a game, and I don't like losing bets, or I don't like losing games that are based on, that are connected to betting. And so, I'm upset by that. So, I'm mad about that game. No, that's not what happens. Those watching or those participating go, not only am I mad that I lost money on the game, or that I thought the game was rigged in some way, even if there wasn't money involved, it's that I don't even trust the game anymore. I don't trust you players, or you coaches, or you referees, because this has happened with referees in the past as well, with Tim Donaghy. And again, it puts this cloud over the whole sport, and everyone watching goes, I don't know if this is real. And if it's not real, then my purpose for watching has to be very different, because the YouTube channel Uncut Hoops had a great point about this the other day, amidst this scandal that's ongoing. It's that, well, it just becomes the WWE. Okay, like you can still do it. You can still have wrestling, but that's not real wrestling, right? Real wrestling is what happens in the Olympics or in high schools and colleges everywhere, where there's actual technique and there's real rules and all that stuff. What WWE is, it's not wrestling. It's just entertainment. It's just a show. It's just a predetermined performance. And so if we now have cheating in sports, in this case, this past week, basketball, well, now everyone starts going, well, wait a second. Now I'm not watching this because I'm watching these incredibly skilled athletes challenge each other in fierce competition and playing by the rules, so we can just see who legitimately is the winner and the loser of that game. Now we go, at best, we would say, well, I'm just going to watch it because these guys are still really athletic. And yeah, the game is rigged, but it's still cool to see them jump around and dunk and make fancy passes and things like that. And so I'll just keep watching it for the entertainment value of it. Well, that's only some people. The rest of us won't watch it all because I have no interest in watching something that's not real. Just like I don't watch WWE, I won't watch something that's fake in the sporting world either. So the whole premise of sport is that we all have an understanding. The players, the coaches, the refs, the fans, the media, we are all participating under the assumption that everyone involved tries their hardest, which is part of why the whole taking games off, that the load management stuff infuriates so many people, because all of us go, no, part of the sport is you have to try all the time. You don't just get to quit. You don't just get to go, I'm tired, I'm going to sit on the bench. No, you have to try. You have to participate as best you can. And so that's, they're not breaking any rules, so it's not ruining the game necessarily, but you can see how that's deteriorated NBA viewership in recent years. Is like, yeah, people are kind of tired of that. So we have to know that you're trying. We have to know that you're trying to win. Not only are you trying with your effort, but you're actually trying to win the game, and that we can keep track of who wins and loses. And again, there's a competition within the game, but then there's a competition across a whole season, and we can follow that over many years, and we care about that stuff. And so if you're not trying, if you're not playing to win, if you're not doing your best within the game's rules to play by the rules, again, if all you're doing is fouling and traveling and doing all these things, like that decreases our enjoyment of it as well. We want to see you're going to make mistakes, you're going to commit penalties, but for the most part, you got to try your best to play by the rules. And then whatever the outcome is, that's the outcome. And we all go, great, that was fun. Let's play again tomorrow night. And that keeps us coming back and watching. But cheating undermines all of that. And it's the reason why it's so important is it's bigger than sports. It's, sports, as I discuss in my course, sports is one of those things that is a cultural institution. Sports have been part of Western culture for thousands of years. Obviously much more formalized and resourced and competitive in the last 100 to 150 years. But sports have always been part of our culture. And so it is an institution in itself. And the worst thing we can do is start to degrade the institutions that we all supposedly believe in. And sports is one of those things. And again, it has some rules, like I said, that we all come into this thing as fans or anyone watching going, okay, I'm here for a reason, to see you guys play hard and try to win the game. And if I want to cheer for one side or another, that'll be great. And then hopefully it goes well enough and smoothly enough and people enjoy it enough that we can do it again tomorrow and next year and 100 years from now, because the sport is what matters. But like any institution, if there's anything that chisels away at the legitimacy of it, we have huge problems. So what are our other institutions? Well, our justice system. This is why the country freaks out when we discover corruption in police departments or with judges, because we can't have a functioning justice system if nobody understands what the rules are. If someone can get away with a crime because a corrupt judge rules in a certain way, well then how do I know how to live? And what, can I commit certain crimes now? Can I start harming my fellow citizens? We can't live in that world. That world can't function properly. So, these institutions, they maintain the solidity of who we are as people. And even sports, though it's not as important as some other institutions, it is one of those things. We gain some moral clarity even in sport because we watch sports. As I talk about in my class, we see the people acting in the sports, okay, the performers, and we watch them, and we have these morals of our community where we go, one of the morals we all try to live by is fairness. Okay. We try to not cheat each other, and we try to treat each other reasonably equally. We might be trying to win, but we're still going to be fair about it. And so we watch sports hoping to see the attitude of fairness that we try to live out in the real world portrayed in a hyper focused, intense, short situation, like a 1 hour game. Okay. We think, I want to see these athletes perform these moral activities really great. And what that does is it reconfirms that what they're doing is the right thing. It reconfirms for the audience that, yes, that's how you should do it. Now I'm going to go back in my normal life and I'm going to keep acting that way too, because I saw really great people doing it. And now, even though I'm just a regular citizen, I can go do that in my normal life too. Okay. So whether it's fairness or being highly skilled or, being a good neighbor, a good teammate, whatever, like these things we want to see portrayed in a sporting event. Because a sport is a little story. That's why I tie my class to sports and literature. These are stories that people play out. And so we want to see the people on the center stage, the ones on the field, on the court, wherever, acting properly, because we're here to watch people do things the right way. And if they're not doing it the right way, well, you're going to get in big trouble. And what it also does is it undermines what we all said we believed in. And so now we either have to change it and go, well, I guess we don't believe in fairness anymore. Well, that's not good. Or we just stop participating. We stop watching it and go, well, I'm going to look for the morality of fairness in some other avenue of life. And so, as I said, the justice system is one of those. Democracy is one of those, right? That's why we had, again, people losing their minds in 2020. Why? Because whether it actually occurred or not, there was sort of the underlying threat or possibility that maybe there was some voting fraud going on. Well, if that institution of one person, one vote, they get tallied up and we count things properly and the winner doesn't complain about, or the loser doesn't complain and the winner doesn't gloat, and we say, look, the people have spoken, this is what we do, and we go on to the next thing. If we don't have that, well then how does all this function? How do we know who should be in charge? How do we know what laws to pass? All those kinds of things. The fabric of our system we have here, our civilization, starts to degrade, and we can't have that. We need stability. We need things that make sense. Yes, things change, things have excitement and new possibilities pop up sometimes, but overall there has to be a structure. And so in sport, we see amazing things all the time. We see people doing having amazing plays. We see incredible feats of athleticism. We see incredible things that we never imagined before. But underneath it is the stability of the game, because the game is what matters the most, and we can't ruin the game. Again, even at the expense of winning and losing. Winning and losing is secondary. The game matters the most. And if that falls apart, well, we got to go to something else now because no one wants to watch that. And so in my course, we get to the point about cheating, again, as I said in the unit where we read the novel Shoeless Joe and watch the film Field of Dreams. But it actually starts at the very beginning, because in my very first lecture, which is available for free, we talk about this sort of Platonic ideal where we pursue anything in life. It could be, again, justice, could be love, could be whatever, where we have to define it and we have to pursue it at its highest level. Okay, we can't just sort of do it. I mean, you can, but that's not what we're here for. We're not here to just slide by in life. We're trying to be excellent people. And so as a teacher, that's what I'm trying to tell my students. Like, you're not here to just be an average person. You're here to be hopefully someone great at some point in your life. And so from a sports standpoint, we implement the ideas of Plato and some of his philosophy where we're aiming at something higher. He calls at the lowest level, he calls it the appetite stage, where you're looking for things that just sort of sustain you. And in the sports world, that would be like money and prizes. Like, well, we're trying to win. Yes, because that's part of sports. Yeah, but why are you trying to win? Well, because I want to win the trophy. I want to make a lot of money. Well, that's the lowest level. So these guys who are cheating to try to make money, well, that's the lowest level of sport. And in fact, that doesn't even work, because now no one's going to let you play anymore. So that's going to backfire at some point as well. So you can't live at that first level. The second level in sport and in other parts of life is it's sort of this emotional level where you're trying to pursue glory. So maybe it's not the money, but you're trying to be someone that everyone respects, and they talk about you after you've retired, and they tell stories about how great you were, and you kind of live on, and that's why we have a Hall of Fame and all that stuff. And it's like, well, I want to be a great athlete because that's what I want. I want people to shower their love on me and give me all this acclaim. It's like, yeah, that happens. That's one way of going through sports, and people do it, and we do remember them, and they were great athletes and all that. But even that's not the best thing. The best way to go through sport is to aim at the highest level, and Plato calls this the level of reason, where you actually aim beyond just the immediate rewards. You even aim beyond the long-term glorification. You aim at the betterment of the thing itself. And in our case, it would be sports. And in my class, it's also stories. We want to live the best possible sports story we can. Because if you do that, then along the way, you might also get the trophies and the money and all the fun prizes that come with being a good athlete. You might also get the long-term glory where people remember your name and you're in halls of fame and all that stuff. You can still get all that stuff, but you have to aim at the best thing if you want to be considered a truly great kind of representative of the people and a representative of the sport and truly a legendary figure, in our case, in the world of sports. And so we're aiming at excellence, and the excellence is, well, we want to make not only myself great, not only my team great, I want to make the sport itself as great as possible. And every athlete has the opportunity to do that, which again, I talk about in my class, where every single athlete is both part of the system of their team, of their sport, of the culture, but they're also individuals with the power to create new versions of the morals and the values that have already existed. So you're not just upholding the structure that we've all gotten comfortable with and that we all enjoy. Again, playing by the rules and being a good sportsman and all that stuff. You can even go further than that. You can create a new way of being excellent, a new model for how athletes should behave or perform their sport. And so that's what we're aiming at in my class, where we take morality and stories, literary pieces of great literature, sometimes fiction like in Shoeless Joe, sometimes nonfiction. We analyze great documentary films and great sports journalism. We look at all sorts of forms of literature. And what we're looking for are great models that we can follow that go beyond the money, that go beyond the records and the glory and all that stuff, and appear to be aiming at something even higher than that. And those are the truly heroic figures. Those are the ones that instantly pop into our minds as going, that's the role model. That's who I want my kids to be like. That's who I like watching on TV and cheering for. I don't even care if they win all the time. I just like them because they're such great representatives of the moral community, and they exemplify that in the way they behave in their sport. And better yet, if they also behave that way in their real lives. And so that's what we aim at. And the course I teach is intended to have some depth to it because it takes some self-reflection, and it encourages athletes or just fans or parents of athletes to take a hard look and go, well, wait a second, what am I doing this for? Why am I playing this sport? What am I trying to get out of this? Is it just to win? Is it just to make money? Is it just to win the trophy, stand on the medal stand, whatever it is? Is it because I'm obsessed with the glorification that I want people to love me and chant my name and all this stuff? Or could we be doing something even better? Could I be aiming at sport in the highest possible way, a true pursuit of excellence? Well, with all the recent, whether they're outright scandals or just instances of bad behavior, it doesn't look like those things are happening. And so that's why, again, I create a whole course about it so that I can help young athletes or their coaches or their parents or their teachers, whoever is involved in the sports world, to learn about how we can act better, both on the sports playing surface and off, so that, again, yes, if you do things right, you'll get the credit. But more importantly than that, the sport gets the credit, because we, as citizens and fans, we want to watch excellence. And yes, we want to watch people win, but we also want to watch people behave in the right way. We like seeing people who win properly. We like seeing people, even if they lose, they do it properly. That wins over anything else. And with the spread of social media and how fast these stories get spread and rumors develop and all these things that our modern technology has given us, these instances of bad behavior get spread even faster and they become even worse than they were before. In decades past where maybe someone did something that was, again, illegal or, just bad behavior in some way, maybe you could kind of keep it quiet for a while. Well, you can't do that anymore. So every single piece or instance of bad behavior is now elevated immediately because of our ability to communicate and tell these stories through technology. So if you are someone involved in the world of athletics and you want to make more of a difference in training young people, advising people who are already, experienced athletes, again, I teach this stuff. And so if you're interested, please let me know. And if we want to keep sports going, the gambling stuff is already causing some problems. It's so ironic and funny when, I've been watching ESPN and seeing things online, following some of these stories. And it's funny how, they'll be talking about it for 5 minutes. They'll cut to a commercial. Guess what the commercial's about? Gambling. FanDuel or DraftKings or whatever, or something for Vegas or whatever. It's like, yeah, you're simultaneously talking about how bad this is, but you're also promoting it, out of the other side of your mouth. So it's like, I don't know how we can have both if you're part of the sports world. And, if we're going to aim higher at sports, if we want something to be left for future generations, for our kids to have someone to look to, or for them to be athletes themselves and then perform the proper way, well, we've got to be demonstrating it better. We've got to understand the morals of the community and then act those out in the world of sports. And then we'll tell positive stories about you, and you can hopefully earn some of those rewards that come with being a great athlete. But the better thing will be that the future of athletics will be supported because the generations that follow will also be hopefully pursuing that form of excellence where the sport is the real winner. So we'll keep an eye on some of these scandals. Who knows what will happen? I would assume especially in the Rozier case, if it's found to be legitimate, he will probably be never heard from again as far as playing. He won't be allowed in any sort of record books, or won't be allowed back in the sport. He'll be banished just like other sports gamblers have been found in the past. So we'll see what happens, but we have to improve behavior, and sports are one of the ways, because it's so public, that we can make it better. But it requires a little bit of learning, maybe even a little understanding from the world of English and literature. And that would help instill these better stories in these athletes' minds. So we'll see what happens in the future. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.